Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin. Long before the oceans waved, before rivers braided through mountains and the sky mirrored itself in liquid blue, Earth was dry, scorched and silent. It spun like a newborn ember in the vast nursery of the solar system, wrapped in rock and dust with no song of water to soften its breath. But above, beyond what the infant Earth could ever see, there drifted ancient messengers, icy, luminous, and forgotten by time. Comets, they wandered from the farthest reaches of the solar system, born in a realm colder than sleep, where sunlight is a whisper and movement is a memory. These frozen nomads carried something delicate, something sacred. Water locked in ice, older than any planet, older perhaps than the sun itself. As Earth spun through its violent adolescence, it called to these visitors with invisible hands of gravity, and one by one they listened. They fell, not like feathers, but like fire. Their frozen hearts struck stone with thunder, cracking the air and shaking the crust. And yet, from their destruction came life's first promise, a droplet, a trickle, a shimmer on the stone. Water. We imagine water now as familiar, as a glass on the table, as rain tapping the window. But there was a time when water was foreign to Earth. Its atoms came from stars that died in silence and were reborn in clouds that circled galaxies. Hydrogen, the simplest whisper of matter, was always here, from the very beginning. Oxygen was forged in the bellies of massive stars, then scattered like pollen across the cosmos. But it took a delicate meeting, one atom clasping another, to make the molecule we now cannot live without, H2O. It formed in dust, in ice, in vapor swirling in the vacuum. It froze to the skin of comets like frost on ancient glass. And as those comets drifted inward, drawn by the warmth of a forming sun, they brought with them not just water, but memory. For water remembers. It remembers the stars, remembers the void, remembers the impact that brought it home. Imagine now the early Earth, bruised and battered, shrouded in volcanic breath. It seethed with magma rivers and skyless heat, the ground always trembling beneath the weight of its own awakening. Into this crucible the comets fell. They didn't arrive all at once, nor gently. It was a time of chaos called the Late Heavy Bombardment, a storm of rock and ice that scarred every surface it touched. The moon still bears the marks. Earth, though, had another gift. Tectonics, erosion, breath. The craters were swallowed, but the water remained, pooled in hollows, sizzled into steam, cooled into mist, and eventually gathered into the basins that would become oceans. Billions of comets, each a droplet-bearing ghost, changed Earth from a burning stone to a blue marble. Not all scientists agree. Some point to volcanic outgassing, where Earth's own deep layers might have wept vapour, but the comets remain one of the most poetic answers. Ice from the edge of everything falling into fire and becoming rain. You can almost hear it if you try. The hush of space, the distant whisper of a comet's icy tail trailing behind it like the hem of a ghost's robe. The thrum of speed as it descends. And then, impact. Stone against ice, flame against frost. For a moment all is chaos, but in that chaos, in the violent union of opposites, something new begins. The first puddle, the first fog, the first mirror in which the sky could see itself. Water has no voice, but it teaches everything. It flows where nothing else can. It wears down stone not through strength, but through patience. And before it ever touched a leaf, before it ever cradled a fish or kissed the air as rain, it came from the stars. It fell through fire to find us. Scientists have traced the fingerprints of this ancient water. Using isotopes, tiny variations in atoms, they study the water in comets and compare it to the water in our oceans. The results are mixed, mysterious and open-ended, just like all the best stories in science. Some comets match Earth's water almost perfectly, others do not. This suggests that perhaps the water came not from one kind of comet, but many, or perhaps from asteroids with frozen hearts of their own. It's possible that Earth gathered its water like a patchwork quilt, some from outer wanderers, some from inner fire, but still, in the poetic version that scientists quietly admit they love, comets are the bringers of blue. The idea that the water in your glass once drifted for billions of years in the shadowy edges of the solar system, waiting for its moment to fall, that is not just chemistry, that is a lullaby of creation. Now imagine Earth's first ocean. It didn't appear overnight. It crept in, gathering in lowlands, fed by rains that fell for thousands of years, unending. The planet wore a shroud of storms. Lightning stitched the sky. The ground hissed and steamed. There were no continents then, just scattered islands of molten rock slowly cooling, slowly giving in to the embrace of water. The ocean was not blue at first. It was dark, mineral-rich, steaming. But it was a beginning. In those waters, simple molecules swirled. Some found each other. Some built chains. Some learned to copy themselves. Life, though still unformed, was watching from beneath the waves. Water was its mirror, its cradle, its breath. Without the comets, without the falling ice, none of it could have happened. Even now, the memory of those first gifts lingers. Every river is a descendant of that ancient rain. Every drop you drink has travelled through cloud and root and rock. But before that, it may have drifted through space, curled in the body of a comet older than memory. We live on a world of oceans, but we owe that water to something that came from beyond. The next time you stand in the rain, you might close your eyes and feel it. Something distant, something ancient, whispering against your skin. A comet's final gift, a star's forgotten breath. The sky falling slowly, tenderly as water. Drift with me now, not through time alone, but through the inner folds of the Earth's memory, where water became more than a gift, it became an architect. Once the comets delivered their ancient blue offering, once the skies wept and the basins swelled, Earth did not remain still. The water began to move. It carved its thoughts into stone, wrote its history into canyons, spoke in rivers, and sang lullabies through glaciers. Long before a single creature drew breath, water had already shaped the soul of the planet. Beneath the ocean's dark veil, the crust fractured gently, and from these fractures rose warm whispers, hydrothermal vents, breathing minerals and heat. Here, water did more than erode, it created. The minerals dissolved in these deep sunless springs gave birth to the earliest structures that might be called life. Tiny filaments, delicate membranes, patterns that could copy themselves. Scientists now believe that it was in these black underwater chimneys that life first sparked, not in the warmth of sunlight, but in the quiet alchemy of heat and chemistry, where water was both canvas and ink. This was not just an ocean, it was a cradle, and the water in that cradle was not new. Each molecule had wandered, collided, and dreamed across galaxies. Every drop carried with it stories of dead stars and frozen worlds. It pooled into vast silence deeper than mountains are tall, and waited. Over time it learned to listen. When heat met carbon and sulfur met patience, the first living things whispered themselves into being, not with lungs or bones, but with membranes and curiosity. They floated, they clung, they divided. They had no eyes to see the water that held them, no mouths to name it, but it was everything. And perhaps the water knew, in some quiet molecular way, that it was now home, not just guest, but giver, not just memory, but mother. As life deepened and grew more complex, water remained its constant. It carried nutrients, dissolved elements, transported whispers of day across the oceans. Even as land began to rise slowly, unevenly from volcanic breath and shifting plates, the water never abandoned the story. It kissed the new shores, caressed the cliffs, carved fjords and softened valleys. It began to rise into clouds, then fall again in rain, creating the endless breath of weather. Every raindrop that falls now is a link in that ancient chain, a cycle begun with comets and continued by evaporation and return. The hydrologic cycle, we call it. But beneath the technical name lies something more lyrical, a rhythm, an inhale and exhale of the earth itself. Rain rises, then returns. Rivers run, then rest. Oceans stir, then sleep. And in the air, water danced. Tiny droplets suspended in clouds, those slow drifting ships of the sky, began to form patterns, clusters, storms. Lightning followed them, thunder listened, and as water moved not just across the land but through the sky, it touched every surface, filled every hollow, and became the sculptor of climates. It cooled the tropics and warmed the poles. It held heat, carried wind, became the invisible shaper of seasons. Without water there is no weather. Without weather there is no soil. Without soil no forests. Without forests no breath. It all begins with water. Science now tells us that even deep within the earth, far below where sunlight ever reaches, there is more water than in all the surface oceans combined. Trapped inside minerals, locked within the mantle, are oceans that do not shimmer or wave, but are just as real. Some of this water too may have come from the comets, sunk deep into the crust by time and pressure. Or it may have always been there, part of Earth's birth. Either way, it waits. And from time to time it rises, through volcanic sighs and geysers that spout like dreams from beneath the crust. The water within and the water without speak to each other, slowly, in cycles longer than lifetimes. Earth breathes through this conversation, and the moon, our silent companion, plays its own part in the language of water. When the comets fell and the oceans rose, the moon was already there, locked in orbit, a memory of a violent past collision, and yet it steadies the tides. Each day the oceans bow toward it. Each night they retreat. This tug, this ancient rhythm stirred the first life to move. Tiny cells learn to follow the currents, to feel the push and pull of gravity. The moon taught water to sway, and in doing so taught life to dance. Even now the tides govern the rhythms of coastal life, from the smallest shellfish to the largest migrations, and every tide is a quiet echo of the comet's gift. You can think of Earth as a water planet, but it is more accurate to say Earth is a water story. A tale still being told, with each droplet a word, each ocean a paragraph. From comet ice to river song, from cloud to cell, water has been both narrator and stage. And yet, it remains mysterious. How much water did the comets bring? How much arose from Earth's own minerals? No one knows for certain, but maybe that's the point. In science, mystery is not failure, it's invitation. The unanswered questions are doors, and water is always flowing through them. Now think of the water in your own body, the tears that rise without reason, the sweat on your skin under a summer sun, the breath you exhale, which carries invisible mist. Nearly every part of you is made of water. Your cells are small oceans, your blood a river, your brain a tide pool of thought. The water inside you may once have been part of a glacier, or a thunderstorm, or an ancient sea, or drifting silently inside a comet 1 billion years ago. You're not just made of stars. You are made of their melted echoes. Water connects you not just to Earth, but to the farthest edge of the solar system. You are, in some quiet way, a vessel that carries the memory of comets. The next time you cup water in your hands, think of its journey, not just through rivers and pipes, but through time itself. It is older than the continents, older than the moon. It was a traveller before Earth had a name, and now it reflects the sky back to you. In it you can see the stars, the clouds, and your own face. What a strange thing, that water which fell in fire now rests so softly against your skin. What a wonder that something so gentle can shape a world. Gift that it came from such distance, such silence, such cold, only to become the warm breath of life. Let us drift now to the quiet, to the hush that follows creation, where Earth no longer burns but breathes, and the waters that once fell like stars now rest as lakes, as oceans, as dew on a leaf before sunrise. The age of bombardment has passed. The fire has cooled. The comets, once fierce visitors, have long since retreated to their frozen orbits at the edge of our solar system. Earth has become a world of blue and green, wrapped in water vapour, adorned with rivers and cloud-veiled dreams. Life now thrives, and though we rarely pause to consider it, every movement of life, every flutter, every pulse is still wrapped in the legacy of water. For all that has changed, the source remains unchanged. The story of our oceans is not just the story of falling ice, but of time folding over itself, of silence becoming sound, and of matter finding memory. The oceans deepened over eons, not just in volume but in meaning. They became mirrors for the sky, graveyards for the fallen, cradles for the unborn. They remembered each comet, each volcanic sigh, each tectonic collision that gave birth to islands and swallowed continents. And within their salted skin, life grew brave. Tiny creatures began to move not just with the currents but against them. They learned to see, to hunt, to dream in their own cellular ways. Fish flickered like thoughts, and coral grew like memories, layered, silent, ancient. The oceans became both kingdom and keeper, and water with its shapeless patience became the first parent, teaching by touch, by temperature, by tide. Even as life crept onto land, as fins found toes and gills gave way to breath, water was never left behind. Every creature that stepped onto the soil carried the sea within. Our blood holds its salt, our cells crave its minerals. The rhythm of the womb echoes the tides. In every one of us, the ocean still speaks. It tells us that we came from falling ice, that the water we drink is older than every mountain, older than language, older than thought. It tells us that even in stillness there is movement, even in silence a song. The comets that once flared through the darkness are now fragments of memory, but their gift endures. And we have learned in our own quiet way to trace the story back. Space agencies have sent missions to the comets, tasting their icy breath, scanning their mineral bones, asking the same ancient question: did you bring us home? Some comets match our oceans, some do not, but all offer clues. Each one is a book of frozen pages, each molecule a word in the long story of life. Rosetta, the European spacecraft that danced beside Comet 67P, listened closely. It smelled the gases, it touched the dust. And though the answers were complex, the poetry remained. Ice from the edge of the system, bearing whispers of the beginning. Science walks carefully in the presence of mystery, and water, despite its simplicity, remains one of our greatest riddles. We know it bends light, we know it expands when frozen, we know it is the only substance that can be solid, liquid, and gas within the narrow warmth of Earth's skin. We know it dissolves and transports, cools and ignites, builds and breaks, but where it came from exactly remains blurred. Some suggest Earth always had water, locked in its birth rocks, released slowly through heat and pressure. Others lean toward the comets, or carbonaceous asteroids, smaller, darker cousins that carry ice deep within. Most likely it was not one source but many. A collaboration across time and space, a chorus instead of a solo. That's how life works. That's how stories are told. And so the story is still unfolding. Even now Earth loses some water to space, mist evaporating beyond return, and it gains water from time to time as dust and ice continue to fall unnoticed. The balance shifts, but it holds. Water flows in new patterns, through cities now, through steel and plastic veins, pumped and stored, filtered and spilled. It weeps from machines. It evaporates into digital clouds. Yet even in this modern shape, water keeps its ancient mind. It remembers comets, it remembers the fall, it remembers silence, and it waits, patient as always, to be noticed. Think of the last time you stood by the sea, the way the wind smelled, the way the waves moved. Not chaotically, but with purpose, with rhythm. Each wave a breath, each foam line a thought returned to the sand. That sea, no matter which coast, is older than myth. And the water that touched your feet may once have rested inside a comet's core, curled in the cold beyond Neptune, dreaming of a planet it would someday meet. It may have touched the gills of an ichthyosaur or fallen as snow on the first fern. It may have drifted through a glacier for 1,000 years before finding your skin. We speak of water as if we own it, but in truth, it owns us. It shapes our bodies, writes our weather, decides our hunger. We build near it, pray for it, dream beside it, and yet it asks nothing in return but to flow. Someday Earth may dry, the sun will grow, the oceans will boil, the blue will burn to steam, but even then, the story won't end. Water will rise into space once more. It may freeze, gather and drift again. Perhaps it will form comets again, icy vessels waiting for another planet, another cradle. Perhaps long after us it will fall again on a barren world and begin again the slow miracle of life. It is not bound to us. We are simply one verse in its long cosmic poem. So now, as you lie beneath your ceiling or stare at the rain on your window, remember, you are living inside a story older than light. Every sip, every tear, every misted breath you take has travelled impossibly far to find you. It crossed the dark. It survived the fall. It melted on rock and waited for your hands. We are not separate from water. We are where it chose to pause. And when it leaves us, as it always does, it does not die. It becomes sky. It becomes memory. It becomes the shape of what comes next. The comets carried more than ice. They carried beginnings. They carried hope. And they carried you. Beneath your feet, the earth is dreaming, not in suns, but in heat, in pressure, in ancient rhythms that move too slowly for human eyes to follow. You walk on the crust, a thin shell of floating stone, unaware that far below, the planet is holding something soft, something forgotten, something essential. It is water. Not in lakes or rivers, not in clouds or ice, but locked inside the very minerals of the mantle. This is the water that never flows, never ripples in moonlight, never kisses the surface. It is the water that sleeps, and for billions of years it has been resting there, waiting. When we speak of oceans, we imagine waves and foam and salt. But the greatest ocean of all may lie beneath the ground, deep within the earth's warm and crushing heart. Let's drift gently downward now through layers of stone and time. First through the crust, a mosaic of shifting plates, floating like broken puzzle pieces over a sea of semi-solid rock. Below that lies the mantle, vast and mysterious, a place where rock moves like slow honey, where temperature and pressure squeeze atoms into forms they would never choose on the surface. Here, water is not free. It is held within the crystalline cages of minerals like ringwoodite and wadsleyite, trapped in bonds so tight that the water cannot flow, only whisper. And yet scientists have found that the mantle may hold 3 times as much water as all the oceans above. It is not a sea as we know it, but it is a sea all the same, a sea of potential. For decades, this idea was only a whisper itself, too strange to prove, too deep to reach. But then came a tiny gift from the Earth's own trembling, a diamond carried up from the mantle by a volcanic eruption, bright and small, born of crushing pressure. Inside it, a trace, an inclusion of ringwoodite, and with it, proof that water was locked far below. It was a message from the deep, a glimmer of truth hidden in crystal. Scientists held that diamond and saw an entire ocean beneath their feet. They realized that water may not have arrived only from above, from comets and falling ice, but also from below, from the very bones of the planet itself. Now imagine that ancient time when Earth was still molten, still shaping itself from fire and gravity. Volcanoes poured their breath into the sky. The surface was a cauldron, and within, water was forming, binding itself to minerals as the planet cooled. This water did not evaporate. It did not run, it stayed, trapped inside the mantle like a secret. And slowly, as Earth aged, some of that deep water began to rise, not as rivers, but as vapour, as volcanic steam, as gas exhaled from the crust's wounds. each eruption a whisper from the deep, each mountain a monument to pressure and memory. The water that formed our oceans may have come in part from these deep exhalations from the mantle's slow breath, seeping upward over millions of years. And so Earth became a world of both falling and rising water. Comets gave from the sky, the mantle gave from below. Together they filled the basins, sculpted the coastlines, and carved out the great blue planet we now call home. But the mantle kept much for itself. Like a parent who gives but never empties, it held water in reserve, locked in its core, in its solid fire. This water cannot be touched, cannot be seen, but it moves slowly. It shifts with the mantle, caught in convection currents, rising in plumes, sinking in slabs. It travels beneath the continents like a forgotten river, shaping volcanoes, feeding earthquakes, guiding the very dance of plates. Scientists now speak of the deep water cycle, a hidden partner to the water cycle we know. We watch clouds become rain, rain become rivers, rivers become sea, but far below, subduction zones pull ocean plates beneath the continents, dragging wet rock deep into the mantle. That water is not lost. It becomes part of the deep memory, stored once more in mineral cages, and then, in time, it rises again through volcanic arcs, exhaled once more into the sky. This deep cycle is slow, quiet, and vital. It balances the Earth's skin, it fuels the fire beneath our feet, and it reminds us that water does not only fall, it returns. Think now of every earthquake you've ever heard about, the sudden shift, the trembling. Beneath that movement lies not just stress but fluid. Water softens rock, water lubricates faults. Water, even hidden in stone, can decide when a mountain rises or a valley forms. In the mantle, water changes everything. It lowers melting points, fuels magma, decides the strength of the crust, and yet we cannot drink it. We cannot see it. It is a presence without form, a ghost of hydration buried beneath miles of pressure. And still it shapes our world. So much of what we see is shaped by what we do not. The mantle, with its slow rivers of stone and secret oceans, holds the weight of continents, the heat of beginnings, and the memory of ancient waters. It teaches us that stillness can be powerful, that silence can be filled with meaning, that what lies beneath the surface often matters most. You are walking always on the skin of something ancient and fluid. Beneath your steps is not solidness, but story. The cradle beneath the mantle is not just a poetic image, it is a scientific truth wrapped in metaphor. It holds not only water, but time. It holds the remains of every plate that has ever sunk, every ocean that has ever closed, every volcanic breath that has ever shaped the air. It holds the water that may one day return to the surface, steam up into a storm, fall again as rain and touch your skin. It holds perhaps the future of life itself, because without that deep water, without that hidden reserve, Earth would crack, drift, and decay. The mantle's water is the quiet balance, the hidden rhythm that allows everything else to dance. And so we begin to understand Earth's oceans are not just surface stories, they are echoes of what lies below. The water you drink, the lake you swim in, the rain that kisses your roof. They may have started their journey in the stars, but many of them began again, later, in the stone. Beneath the continents, Beneath the mountains, beneath all that seems still, there is a song. It is slow, seismic and soft. It sings of pressure and patience, and its chorus always is water. Let us drift deeper now, not downward through stone, but inward, into the idea that the Earth is not merely a planet, it is a keeper of memory, and water is its ink. Inside the mantle, that great swirling mass of semi-solid rock, there exists a whispering system too slow for sight and too vast for any one mind to hold at once. This is where the water beneath our oceans lives, not in pools, but in bonds, in molecules wedged between silicate crystals under immense pressure and unimaginable heat. The temperature here can exceed 1,000 degrees Celsius, and yet the water remains not as steam or droplet, but as part of the rock itself. It is a ghostly presence locked into structure, holding shape within form. It does not move as we understand movement, but over eons it is carried by currents of molten stone, slow rivers of mantle convection that circle like old songs beneath the continents. This hidden water does not make waves, but it makes mountains. It does not flow, but it controls the flow of magma, the melting of rock, the tension between plates. Where this deep water gathers in higher concentrations, rocks melt more easily. Magma is born, volcanoes rise, islands appear in the sea. Where the mantle is dry, the earth stiffens, the crust cracks but does not heal. The deep water's presence softens the rigidity of the world, makes it flexible, makes it breathe. It is the lubricant of the earth's bones, the sigh within its core, the presence that allows it to bend rather than break. And through these gentle shifts, continents drift, basins open, and new landscapes are formed. We often think of volcanoes as destroyers, but they're also the Earth's way of sharing. Every plume that rises, every mountain that bleeds lava, is carrying something from deep inside. Sometimes that something is carbon, sometimes sulfur, and sometimes, if you listen closely, it is water. Steam rises first long before the lava. It billows out from fumaroles and vents, a ghost returning to the sky. This is the water that has waited in the dark, caught inside olivine and pyroxene, now finally released to the light. It becomes part of clouds. It falls as rain. It joins the surface water, completing a journey that began before language and will continue long after memory. When scientists model the planet's interior, they speak in units of pressure and temperature. But beneath these numbers is something more human, more mysterious. The mantle is a womb, not just of rock but of change. It cradles what will be. And water, that most familiar of substances, takes on unfamiliar forms here. Bound within ringwoodite, it exists at depths of hundreds of kilometers. This mineral, only stable under great pressure, carries up to 1.5% of its weight in water. A small number until you realize the mantle is enormous. Billions of tons of water may be held inside the Earth's middle, quietly, without fanfare, waiting for the conditions to shift, for the planet to open its breath. Sometimes that breath comes violently, subduction zones, where oceanic plates dive beneath continents, carry water-rich rock deep into the mantle. As the pressure increases, these rocks release their water, causing partial melting. Magma forms. Volcanoes rise in arcs. Japan, the Andes, the Cascades, each one born from water's quiet command. And so the ocean gives itself back to the sky through fire. Water cycles not just through rivers and clouds, but through molten rock and shattered crust. This deep water cycle is not fast, but it is faithful. It has turned for billions of years, unbroken, reshaping the planet from the inside out. Even now, we are just beginning to understand its scale. Seismologists listen to earthquakes the way astronomers study stars, through vibrations, and in the tremors of great quakes, they detect anomalies, strange zones where waves slow down, bend, scatter. Some of these zones, scientists believe, are reservoirs of deep water, soaked slabs of rock slowly descending, or vast pockets of hydrated minerals beneath the transition zone. These are not oceans in any way we can visit, but they are oceans nonetheless. Oceans of possibility, oceans of waiting. The existence of this hidden water changes our understanding of Earth. It explains why the surface remains dynamic, why continents drift instead of locking in place, why the climate has remained, despite catastrophe, within the narrow band that allows life. Deep water may buffer the planet's cycles. It absorbs heat, it moderates melting, it softens the tremble of stress, and perhaps most astonishingly, it holds within it the seeds of life. When water is present in magma, it affects the kinds of gases released, the way rock cools, the chemistry of new crust. Some theories even suggest that life's earliest molecules may have formed in volcanic pools fed by deep water, where heat and chemistry met again and again in the quiet breath of creation. Think of that life might owe not only its start to oceans above, but to the water beneath. That the first chain of amino acids, the first whisper of a membrane, the first self-replicating molecule might have sparked because of steam rising from a crack in the earth. Water that had spent eons locked beneath the surface finally released. Life, then, is not a surface phenomenon. It is an echo, a rising. And you too are shaped by this depth. Your bones contain minerals forged by plate tectonics. Your blood carries salts once drawn from volcanic ash. The water in your cells may have passed through a magma chamber millions of years ago. You are not separate from the mantle. You are its expression. When you touch water, you touch the result of 1 billion silent eruptions, 1,000 hidden seas, a cycle that began before the moon took its place in our sky. Let this comfort you. The ground beneath your feet is not still, but it is steady. It moves with intention. It listens. It carries memory in stone and water alike. The mantle may never be seen by eyes, but it is felt in every breath of wind, every fall of rain, every stone you hold in your hand. The water beneath the mantle does not ask to be noticed. It is content to shape without praise. But once you know it is there, you can feel it, in the quiet between thoughts, in the warmth of the earth beneath your feet, in the slow, soft pulse of the planet itself. It is not just deep, it is part of you. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the earth not as a sphere of rock and fire, but as a layered symphony of silence and pressure, of deep water held in stone, of breath that takes millions of years to exhale. Far beneath us, below the crust that cracks and the oceans that shimmer, lies the mantle's quiet reservoir, the place where water has no ripples, no waves, no rain, but only memory. Here, it is neither ice nor vapor. It is embedded in minerals, folded into the lattice of olivine and peridotite, hidden in crystalline embraces like lullabies held too tightly to sing. Yet this water is alive, not in motion but in presence, in its power to shape, to soften, to hold. It does not rise with drama, but with patience. It does not roar, but it changes everything. The journey of this deep water is cyclical, and like all the Earth's slow dances, it is not obvious unless you look across millions of years. Beneath the subduction zones, where one plate slides beneath another, the oceanic crust descends carrying not only basalt and sediment, but water soaked into every crack and pore. It is pulled into the depths, down to where temperatures and pressures transform it into something else. Chemical whispers folded into the atomic bones of the mantle rock. It becomes part of the solid earth, unseen, unfelt, but still present. It waits there for eons, and then, through processes older than trees, it begins to rise again. In upwelling plumes, in magma that seeks the surface, in gas that fizzes and bursts through volcanic throats, it returns. The mantle exhales, the water is freed, and somewhere rain falls on a mountain that will erode, feeding rivers that will carve valleys and feed roots. And the story turns once more. This deep cycle is not just a background process, is one of the reasons life endures. Without it, volcanoes would cool and die. Continents would stall and crack. Carbon would remain trapped and the air would grow still. But with water in the mantle, rocks melt, plates shift, gases escape. The atmosphere stays alive. Earth remains in motion. The great paradox of water is that its gentleness creates strength. Its ability to slip between things gives it the power to bind them. Inside the mantle, it reduces the temperature at which rock melts, lubricates faults, creates space for change. A dry mantle would be a silent planet. A wet mantle breathes. And this breath is delicate. Too much water, and the mantle becomes too soft, too little, and it hardens. Somewhere between these extremes lies the balance that Earth has somehow maintained for billions of years. It is easy to overlook this because the mantle does not shimmer like the sea, does not pour from our taps or fall on our windows, but it is the hidden conductor of the planet's surface life. It guides the cycles we can see by holding steady the ones we cannot. It is the unseen half of the hydrosphere. It reminds us that water is not only a surface blessing, it is a planetary principle. Even the continents owe their shape to water beneath them. Granitic crust, which forms the heart of continents, is born from magmas enriched by water. Without it, the lighter materials that build land would not rise, would not separate, would not float upon the denser oceanic floor. The very fact that we can stand on land is tied to the water that never touches the sky, and this too humbles us, because it means that dry ground, what we call home, emerged from wetness, from buried steam and mineral-bound droplets whispering upward through molten rock. Every mountain has water in its ancestry. Every desert was built on a scaffold of steam. And still, the mantle holds more. Some scientists estimate that up to 1% of the mantle's weight is water. This sounds small until you recall how large the mantle is. Thousands of kilometers deep, vast enough to contain the volume of our oceans multiple times over. If just a portion of that deep water were to be released rapidly, it would reshape the world. And perhaps in ancient times it did. There are theories that massive volcanic outpourings, like those that form the Deccan Traps or the Siberian Traps, may have been powered in part by deep water, causing climate shifts, extinctions, and transformations. The mantle's silence can become thunder when provoked. And yet it returns to quiet. It always returns. That is water's way. It cycles, it waits, it adapts, it listens, and in doing so it teaches us how to remain. Perhaps this is why water is sacred in so many cultures, not because of its surface, but because of its depth. Not because it quenches thirst, but because it endures where we cannot go. The ancients may not have known the word ringwoodite, but they knew that the earth held something powerful inside. They built stories of underworlds and wombs, of fire gods and water spirits, and maybe, in their own way, they were right. The earth does hold a spirit, and it is soft and slow and always flowing. Now think of the mantle not as a furnace but as a cradle, a place of formation, of slow gestation, a reservoir of time. Each droplet of water held within it has travelled more than you ever will, into the earth, through it, back to the surface, and perhaps again. It is this patience that gives water its wisdom. It doesn't rush, it doesn't demand, simply finds its way again and again, until mountains bow to it and stone melts at its touch. When you drink a glass of water, it is not only sky you taste or see, it is the deep, it is the fire beneath, it is the memory of earth before breath. The mantle's water reminds us that the world is layered with stories we cannot see, that for everything visible there is something hidden that holds it in place. And though we walk on crust, we are carried by something far more ancient and generous. We are cradled by the mantle. We are warmed by its breath, fed by its release, protected by its rhythms. We are, in every quiet moment, held. And one day this water may leave. The sun will brighten, the surface will warm, the oceans may rise into steam and escape, but the mantle will still hold its water deep and silent. It may outlast us, it may begin again, and on some distant tomorrow when the earth has changed its face and the continents are strangers to today, that deep water may rise once more, feed a volcano, build a cloud, fall as rain, and somewhere new life may grow. So the next time you feel the ground beneath you, pause, feel its warmth, its quiet, its strength. Know that beneath your every step lies an ocean not yet seen, a history not yet finished. Know that within you flows water that once hid in stone. You are made in part of the mantle's gift. You are shaped by the deep. You are a vessel of patience, and like the water that shaped you, you too will find your way, gently, silently, completely. In the beginning there was hydrogen, not water, not light, not even stars, just this one simple atom, a whisper of the universe's breath, born in the first few minutes after the Big Bang. It was the first note in a long and quiet song, the smallest and lightest of all elements, and yet destined to become the foundation of everything that would follow. It drifted, alone and patient, through a cosmos still cooling, still stretching, still finding the meaning of time. And in its solitude, hydrogen waited. It did not need to rush, it simply floated, billions upon billions of atoms adrift in an endless night, waiting for the moment when gravity would gather them together and spark the first stars. And in that fire, something changed. Because when hydrogen met itself, not once, but again and again, it danced, it fused, and from this dance came helium, came light, came heat, came the seeds of oxygen, of us. We often forget how essential hydrogen is to our story, perhaps because it is invisible, so light that it escapes our grip, so old that it predates even the galaxies. but water would not exist without it. Every droplet that touches your skin is made of 2 hydrogen atoms bound to 1 oxygen, each hydrogen a relic of the first fire, each one a particle of history. You are surrounded by hydrogen and filled with it, shaped by its pathways, its presence, its persistence. Yet what makes it beautiful is not simply that it is old or that it is everywhere, but that it found a way to join, to bond, to become part of something more. Billions of years after the Big Bang, the Earth formed from dust and debris swirling around a new star. Hydrogen was already here, not as the dominant gas in the atmosphere, but hidden in minerals, bound in chemical structures, waiting for release. The early Earth was hot and wild, its surface cracked and molten, its sky thick with volcanic breath. But slowly things began to settle. Rain began to fall, the oceans began to form, and in every molecule of that new water, the hydrogen danced once more. It linked with oxygen over and over, creating the most gentle and transformative substance known. And it kept doing so again and again, across every stream and tide, across every glacier and tear. Hydrogen does not stay still. It is too light for that, it slips through barriers. It escapes into space unless caught and bound by something heavier. On Earth, it found a home by partnering with oxygen, with carbon, with nitrogen. These unions became water, became methane, became the amino acids of life. In the great soup of early Earth, hydrogen swirled and searched and settled into patterns that would, eventually, copy themselves. Life was not yet breathing, but hydrogen was preparing the breath. It was forming the scaffolds of cells, the skeletons of proteins, the heartbeat of every living reaction. Inside your body right now, hydrogen is in motion. It forms part of your DNA, your blood, your breath. It helps carry energy through molecules like ATP, allowing your muscles to contract, your nerves to fire, your thoughts to flicker. It is not just a relic of the past. It is a worker of the present. Every time you drink water, hydrogen enters you. Every time you exhale, some of it leaves. It is a traveller, a witness, and a builder. But how did it find its way to Earth in such abundance? Some came from the original solar nebula, trapped in the rocks that form the planet. Some arrived later, carried by comets and asteroids, icy bodies that brought not only water but hydrogen-rich compounds. Some was released from Earth's own interior, bubbling out through volcanic vents. And once here, hydrogen began its endless cycling through the air, through the land, through the sea. It dissolved into rain, was pulled into roots, rose through stems, entered leaves, fed the sugars that drive every breath of the biosphere. Hydrogen made the first clouds, not the white cotton shapes we see in the sky, but the vast, cold clouds of interstellar gas that collapsed into stars. It made the sun, and through fusion in the sun's heart, it continues to shine. Every ray of sunlight is the result of hydrogen atoms dancing into helium, releasing energy that travels across space and touches your skin as warmth. So when you stand in the sun, you are feeling hydrogen's fire. You are wrapped in its light. And when plants absorb that light to split water and make sugars, it is hydrogen again that carries the energy forward. In the leaves, in the air, in you. We call water H2O, but we rarely stop to feel the poetry in that formula. The two hydrogen atoms are small, eager, always seeking bonds. The oxygen is larger with a strong pull. When they join, they do something magical. They form a bent molecule, one side slightly positive, one slightly negative. This gives water its strange properties, its ability to stick to itself, to flow in narrow spaces, to dissolve salt, to rise through roots and fall as dew. None of this would happen without hydrogen's peculiar willingness to dance, to link, to stretch the rules of matter just enough to create life. Hydrogen is also what makes water warm. When you heat water, you're not heating a liquid, you're energizing hydrogen bonds. You're causing the molecules to jiggle and separate, to loosen their grip on one another, to rise into vapor. When you cool water, those bonds tighten, they draw closer, they organize into patterns that give us ice with its crystalline silence. Even in snow, hydrogen leaves its mark, delicate branches of geometry, X-fold reflections of symmetry and wonder. No two snowflakes are alike, and yet all are made from the same three atoms, two of which are hydrogen. In the vastness of the universe, hydrogen is still the most common element. It fills the space between stars. It waits in clouds that may become planets, and wherever it finds oxygen, it will dance again. Water has been detected on the Moon, on Mars, in the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, in the atmospheres of exoplanets light years away, and always it carries the same signature, two small ancient atoms whispering toward connection. Hydrogen carries life's potential everywhere it goes. Even our dreams of the future depend on it. Scientists imagine hydrogen fuel cells powering cities, hydrogen rockets taking us to other worlds. They envision clean energy from the smallest atom, a return to the universe's beginning to find a path forward. And still, in all these ambitions, hydrogen remains humble. It does not boast, it does not shine on its own, but when it bonds, when it joins, it transforms the world. And so we come back to water, that quiet everyday miracle. It flows from our faucets, it falls from our skies, it fills our cells. But beneath it all, behind every droplet, is the quiet persistence of hydrogen. An atom that once floated in the void, alone and eternal, now rests gently against your skin, in your lungs, in the rain on your window. It is the atom that began the dance, and we are still moving to its rhythm. Let us drift again, deeper into the gentle, endless journey of hydrogen, where its presence becomes more than chemistry, more than particles and bonds. It becomes the rhythm of life, the breath beneath every living thing. Hydrogen, in its simplest form, is just a proton, a solitary note in the song of the universe. But when joined with others, it becomes a chorus, a structure, a flow. On Earth, its most tender role has always been as the silent half of water. It doesn't carry the name, oxygen does, but it carries the weight of life. Every cell in your body is cradled in water. Every organ pulses with it. Every thought relies on its flow. And within each drop, two atoms of hydrogen hold hands with one of oxygen, not in stillness but in subtle motion, constantly breaking and reforming, whispering across membranes, balancing charge, transferring energy, like dancers never tired, never still. In the earliest seas, when Earth's surface had only just begun to cool, hydrogen moved through tides not yet named. It danced in shallow pools warmed by volcanic breath. It linked with carbon to form the chains of organic molecules. It helped shape amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. It joined with nitrogen to create the backbones of nucleotides, the letters of life's first alphabet. Without hydrogen, these letters could not have written the language of life. It was hydrogen that gave molecules their flexibility, their freedom to bend and spiral, to coil and unfold. Life at its earliest and most fragile needed movement, and hydrogen offered that. A kind of softness, a kind of promise. As the first cells formed, tiny and unsure, hydrogen was already guiding them. Inside their membranes, hydrogen ions, just protons really, moved in and out, creating tiny currents, gradients of energy that powered the chemistry within. This process, known now as the proton motive force, is as ancient as life itself. It is still at work in your own mitochondria, driving the rotation of molecular turbines that make the energy your body runs on. The cell's breath is not air but hydrogen, protons flowing like invisible winds, turning wheels too small to see, powering every blink, every step, every beat of your heart. You're not just animated by hydrogen, you're kept alive by its dance. The ocean itself owes its shape to hydrogen. Its surface tension, the way it forms droplets, the way it climbs up stems and clings to glass, these are not just properties of water. They are songs of hydrogen's bond with oxygen. The bent shape of the H2O molecule creates a tiny dipole, a positive side, a negative side, that causes water molecules to stick to one another, to pull close, to form the skin that insects can walk on, to make the capillary action that draws water from roots to leaves. Hydrogen gives water its cohesion, and cohesion allows water to move in ways no other liquid can. It travels upward, defying gravity, not because it is forced, but because it holds on, molecule to molecule, climbing as if remembering the stars it came from. And in the atmosphere, hydrogen rises still. Not alone, for alone it is too light and too free, but within compounds like water vapour, methane and ammonia, it becomes part of the sky's breath. It forms clouds, it cools the air, it creates the conditions for rain. In the great cycle of evaporation and condensation, hydrogen never rests. It is pulled from oceans, lifted by heat, condensed into clouds and released again in droplets that fall as snow or rain or mist. And when they fall, they touch rock, seep into soil, find seeds waiting for their arrival. Without hydrogen, the rain would not nourish, the rivers would not run, the forests would not grow. Photosynthesis, that ancient green magic that feeds almost all life, begins with hydrogen. Plants use sunlight to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen is released into the air. The hydrogen is held and used to make sugars, the fuel that feeds the plant and all who eat it. Every tree, every blade of grass, every fruit is shaped by hydrogen's quiet work. And when we eat, we carry that hydrogen forward, turning it again into energy, releasing it once more in breath or heat or thought. It is not simply recycled, it is remembered. Even fire needs hydrogen. Combustion is the rapid oxidation of fuel, and fuels, whether wood, oil or gas, contain hydrogen. When fire burns, it breaks hydrogen's bonds and forms new ones with oxygen, releasing heat and light. Every flame you've ever seen, from candle to wildfire, has carried hydrogen's parting gift. It is the warmth of reaction, the farewell of molecules, and in that moment of breaking, something new is made. Ash, smoke, light. Hydrogen does not resist change, it becomes it. But hydrogen is not always gentle. In the vacuum of space, it becomes plasma. In stars, it fuses, releasing vast amounts of energy. In the sun, this fusion has been going on for billions of years, converting millions of tons of hydrogen into helium every second. That energy travels outward, takes 8 minutes to reach Earth, and lights our days, warms our skin, feeds our world. Without hydrogen fusion, there would be no sunlight. Without sunlight, no warmth, no photosynthesis, no life. So every sunrise is a gift from hydrogen. Every beam of light through a leaf, every shadow on the wall is a reminder that somewhere deep in a star's heart, hydrogen is still dancing. In the lab, we've begun to harness hydrogen in new ways. Hydrogen fuel cells generate electricity by combining hydrogen with oxygen, producing only water as waste. They offer a path toward cleaner energy, a return to simplicity. And as we imagine traveling to other worlds, we bring hydrogen with us, not only as fuel but as life support. On the moon, on Mars, wherever we go, we will need water. And from water we can extract hydrogen. With hydrogen we can breathe, we can move, we can survive. On a quantum level, hydrogen is also a lesson in uncertainty. It has no neutrons in its most common form, just one proton, one electron orbiting like a question mark. Its electron cloud is not a dot, but a probability, a field of maybe. It exists where it is likely to be, not where it certainly is. It reminds us that certainty is an illusion, that motion is truth, that everything, even the smallest atom, is a dance. And so, when you hold water in your hands, you are holding hydrogen's legacy. You're holding something that began before the Earth, that shaped the first stars, that passed through nebulae and interstellar clouds, that found oxygen and chose to join it, again and again, until the union became more than chemical. It became essential, in you, around you, through you. When you cry, hydrogen falls with your sorrow. When you sweat, hydrogen cools your body. When you speak, hydrogen vibrates in the air around your breath. It is part of every emotion, every gesture, every quiet moment of presence. It has no colour, no taste, no smell, and yet it carries memory. It carries light. It carries you. So next time it rains and you watch the droplets run down the window, remember the atom that never stopped dancing. That left the stars to become your breath. That spins in your cells. That glows in your sky. That hides in snow and whispers in flame. Remember that you are a temporary shape formed by ancient things. And hydrogen, more than any other, is the thread that ties you to the beginning. The smallest atom, the first element, the quietest miracle. Now let us settle into stillness and imagine that everything, your breath, your bones, your very sense of being, is humming gently with the memory of hydrogen. Not as a concept, not even as a molecule, but as a rhythm older than time, a silent music that binds all things together. The hydrogen that lives in your body today was born in the first 3 minutes after the birth of the universe, before galaxies spun, before stars ignited, before there was a single drop of water or a single thought to name it. Hydrogen existed. It is the universe's first child. It was the beginning of chemistry, the beginning of light, the beginning of everything that would one day open its eyes and wonder why. And still it remains, not as relic, not as memory, but as presence. In the glass you raise, in the cells that shape your skin, in the mist that forms on leaves at dawn. It is the ever-returning, ever-giving atom, and it is never done. Think now of a single hydrogen atom drifting through space, weightless, nameless, alone. There are billions like it spread thinly across the interstellar dark. For eons it simply floats, but time as always begins to gather. A pull is felt, perhaps from gravity, perhaps from chance. The atom drifts closer to another, and slowly a cloud forms, a nebula, vast and quiet, pregnant with possibility. The hydrogen atoms begin to draw toward a center, compressing, heating, tightening, and then, when the weight becomes unbearable, a star is born. And in that moment, hydrogen does not disappear. It transforms, it fuses, it changes into helium, releasing energy, releasing light, releasing the pulse of life. The atom that once floated in solitude becomes part of a burning core, part of the sun that will warm planets, grow forests, melt glaciers, and light the eyes of every living thing beneath its reach. That journey from lone atom to radiant star is hydrogen's gift to the universe. And even after fusion, hydrogen continues. There is always more. It is the most abundant element in the cosmos, not because it is simple, but because it is persistent. It is the raw clay from which all heavier elements are made. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the carbon in your breath, all of them came from stars, but the stars themselves came from hydrogen. So when you trace life back far enough through cells and molecules and atoms, you find that everything begins with hydrogen's first dance. Here on Earth, that dance continues. Every time a plant splits water to make sugar, it is borrowing energy from hydrogen's ancient journey. Every time your mitochondria produce ATP, they are using a flow of protons, bare hydrogen nuclei as their motor. The same atom that lit the first stars now powers your thoughts, your heartbeat, your fingertips as they rest quietly in your lap. It is a kind of cosmic intimacy. You're not separate from the stars. You are their continuation. We tend to think of atoms as small, as particles so tiny they are invisible. But hydrogen defies even that. Its proton is unimaginably small, its electron a vague cloud of probability. And yet, this nothingness is everything. Hydrogen has no form, no colour, no scent. But when it bonds, it creates the shapes of all things. It is the invisible thread running through the visible world. It connects oceans to clouds, clouds to soil, soil to root, root to fruit, fruit to blood, and blood to breath. And when it leaves one place, it finds another. Always bonding, always moving, always becoming. And yet hydrogen is not eternal in its form. In the cores of stars it is transformed into helium and beyond. And when those stars die, they scatter their elements into the galaxy, seeding new clouds, new systems, new lives. The hydrogen that once danced in a red giant may now be part of your tear. The hydrogen that lit a sun may now fall as rain. This is the poetry of physics, the constant transformation, the eternal return. We're not just made of hydrogen, we are hydrogen, in motion, in memory, in meaning. But not all hydrogen remains, some of it escapes. Because it is so light, Earth cannot hold on to it forever. Slowly, molecule by molecule, hydrogen leaks into space, slipping past the atmosphere, never to return. This quiet loss is natural, part of the planet's breathing, but still it is a kind of goodbye. And yet, even as it leaves, hydrogen teaches us something else, that what matters is not possession, but participation. It does not cling. It does not demand. It simply joins where it is needed, and when it is time, it moves on. Perhaps this is why water is so comforting. not just because it cools and cleans, but because it holds hydrogen's spirit, quiet, flowing, glowing, endlessly adaptable. You drink it and it becomes you. You release it and it becomes air. You freeze it and it holds its shape. You boil it and it lifts into the sky. It takes every form without losing itself. It reminds us that identity can be fluid, and presence does not require permanence. In every wave, every drop, every still pool, you can feel hydrogen humming beneath the surface, a soft and ancient song. Scientists continue to study hydrogen to unlock its secrets, to use it for energy, for healing, for exploration. But in the quiet spaces between those discoveries, there remains the wonder, the awe, that the universe began with something so small, that the smallest particle could create the largest things, that from one proton and one electron came oceans, clouds, breath, light. The fact that you exist is a testament to hydrogen's resilience, its curiosity, its dance. When the last star burns out billions of years from now, there will still be hydrogen, scattered, perhaps, but waiting. And in that far silence, perhaps it will gather again. Perhaps it will form new stars, new worlds, new stories. Or perhaps it will rest, content in its journey. For now it is here, in you, around you, holding you in a web of invisible connection that reaches back to the beginning and forward into everything yet to be. So the next time you hold a cup of water, pause. The weight you feel is more than gravity. It is history. It is hydrogen, twice over, clinging to oxygen in a bond that holds your world together. It is stardust made soft. It is ancient motion in your palm. And when you sip, you are not just drinking. You are participating in a cycle that began before earth, before light, before language. You are part of the dance, and hydrogen, quiet and invisible, continues to carry you forward, one bond at a time. Before there was a world to walk on, before rivers knew the shape of stone or winds found a sky to wander, there was only a cloud, a drifting, dreaming collection of dust and gas spread across a quiet corner of the Milky Way. It did not have borders, did not have a name, it was not yet Earth. But within this cloud was the beginning of everything, the seeds of rock and water, of fire and breath. The cloud moved slowly, pulled by gravity, stirred by time, jostled by the echoes of ancient stars that had lived and died long before. Not quiet, though no ear could hear it. It was not still, though to our minds it might seem eternal. This was a stellar nursery, where the fragments of old stars gathered, where hydrogen and helium danced with carbon, oxygen, silicon, iron, ashes of supernovae, broken light reborn as possibility. And in the centre of this growing spiral, a new star would be born, and around it a planet unlike any other. We call this the solar nebula, a vast rotating cloud of gas and dust, cold and full of history. No one saw it form. It happened in a time when vision did not yet exist. But we know from the patterns in our rocks and the elements in our bones that this cloud is our origin. Over millions of years, gravity began to pull its matter inward. Slowly, inevitably, it collapsed. At the centre, pressure built. Hydrogen atoms drew closer and closer, until the heat was unbearable. And then, the first fusion. A star ignited, our sun, a newborn light in the cosmic dark. Its light would one day feed forests, melt glaciers, warm faces. But in those early moments it simply pulsed, stabilizing, reaching, shaping the space around it with solar wind. And that wind pushed outward, clearing the inner regions of the nebula of gas, leaving heavier dust and rock behind. These remnants began to stick together, dust clinging to dust, forming pebbles, then stones, then planetesimals, building blocks of planets. They collided, shattered and reformed, driven by gravity's slow insistence. The early solar system was not calm, it was chaotic, filled with impacts and fragments, moons forming and falling, temperatures rising and falling in violent cycles. Among these fragments, Earth began to take shape, not as a sphere, but as a cluster of molten rock, growing heavier with every collision. Each impact added mass, each collision added heat, and beneath it all, the Earth-to-be was gathering not just matter, but motion. Rotation began, not perfectly, not smoothly, but the planet spun, a slow wobble that would one day become day and night. Its center began to separate, heavier elements like iron and nickel sinking inward to form a core, lighter silicates rising outward to shape a crust. The Earth was not solid, it was alive with magma, glowing with internal heat, and still it was bombarded. Asteroids struck, comets fell. The moon too was born in violence, a Mars-sized object colliding with young Earth, spraying debris into orbit, which later coalesced into the sphere that now pulls on our tides. None of this was gentle, and yet from this fire something remarkable emerged. A planet with the right ingredients, the right distance from the sun, and a story still unfolding. And in all this chaos, water began to arrive. Some came with the comets, icy travellers from the far reaches of the solar system. Some bubbled up from deep within, released by the volcanic breath. Some may have been here all along, locked in minerals that formed within the cloud itself. Wherever it came from, water began to gather, filling basins, softening stone, calming flame. Rain fell for centuries. The earth cooled. Oceans spread like breath. And suddenly the cloud that once drifted in space had become something more. It had become a world. The rocks formed layers. The atmosphere thickened, gases collected, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, methane. And through the haze the sun's light filtered in, warming the surface just enough for water to stay, to cycle, to whisper its way into every crevice. It is strange to think that every mountain, every river, every breath of wind began as dust in a drifting cloud, that every continent was once suspended in silence without shape or name, that the same particles that form your skin once floated between stars. But that is the story the earth tells, the story of becoming, of gathering, of dancing slowly into form. It is not only matter that shaped the earth, but motion. The planet spun, and with it came the rhythm of time. Days passed, nights returned, seasons slowly began, guided by the tilt the planet inherited from its chaotic birth. Rotation gave us the skies turning. Orbit gave us the year. The moon steadied us, slowed us, pulled on our oceans and balanced our dance. Tectonic plates shifted. Continents collided and broke apart. Volcanoes rose. Atmosphere thickened. And through it all, the cloud remembered its path. In every storm, in every wave, you can still feel it. The original momentum, the first spin, the ghost of gravity that taught dust how to become a home. The surface cooled further, allowing crust to form, continents to stabilize. Beneath them the mantle churned, restless. Above them the sky cleared, slowly. Ultraviolet light from the sun broke apart molecules, creating ozone. The air began to hold more than heat, it began to hold promise. And still, the water moved. Rivers carved valleys, rain softened stone. The oceans, shallow and strange, began to host chemicals, minerals, and whispers of something else, something almost alive. The nebula was long gone, blown away by solar wind, scattered into the edges of space. But its memory remained, trapped in isotopes, caught in crystal lattices, echoed in the pattern of elements that make up our bones. Earth, formed from fragments, began to hold itself together, not just physically, but rhythmically. Tides rose, storms circled. Life, though not yet born, was already invited. We are used to thinking of Earth as static, but it is the result of motion, a dance of particles that became planets, of light that became breath. And it all began with a cloud, a quiet swirl of gas and dust, not purposeful, not planned, but full of potential. That cloud, invisible to any who would ever walk the world it made, held within it oceans, forests, music, thought. Held within it the tears of every child, the laughter of every sky, the bones of every mountain, the warmth of every campfire. That cloud held us. And though it no longer exists as it once did, we carry it forward. Every time we speak, we exhale atoms from that cloud. Every time we dream, we are drawing on the silence that birthed the stars. We are not separate from it. We are its continuation, its breath shaped into form. The cloud did not disappear. It became conscious. It became curious. It became home. Let us float now inside the earth that has taken shape, no longer just a dream of dust, but a living, breathing sphere still echoing with the memory of the cloud from which it came. The chaos of its early years has not disappeared. It has only slowed, hidden beneath crust and ocean, transformed into deep-time movement and planetary breath. Beneath the soil we walk upon, the earth is still shifting, still warming from the inside, still pulling on the threads of its own making. The elements that once floated in the stellar nebula now sleep in layers of rock, in crystals buried deep, in magma that pulses like a hidden heart. The planet is not still. It is alive with the energy inherited from its birth, from the collapse of that cloud, from the pressure of its formation. And water, that ancient traveller, is still carving its path across every surface, still writing with soft persistence the story the cloud began. Imagine the air you breathe, not just now but 3 billion years ago. The atmosphere then was thick and alien, filled with gases that would poison us today, but to the earth it was part of a slow and sacred change. Volcanoes exhaled steam and carbon dioxide, comets brought more water. The ocean grew, and under its surface molecules began to meet. Simple ones at first, just carbon chains, nitrogen rings. Then more complex forms, RNA, proteins, lipids. The early Earth was a chemistry experiment fueled by lightning, by sunlight, by the quiet heat of vents rising from the ocean floor, and in the middle of it all the cloud's memory remained. For every atom in those first living molecules once drifted freely in space, waiting for its turn to be more than motion, to become meaning. We call this the origin of life, but perhaps it is better called the continuation of the cloud's curiosity. What began as formless dust now sought structure. It began to copy itself, to react, to adapt, and water, always water, was the stage upon which this miracle played. In its currents life could move, in its folds life could hide, in its depths life could grow. Hydrogen and oxygen, once strangers, now became the environment that sustained and shaped everything. They cooled the heat, they softened the stone, they opened the door to biology. As cells formed and learned to divide, the Earth story changed again. Some began to trap sunlight to split carbon dioxide to release oxygen. This was not quick, it took hundreds of millions of years, but eventually the sky changed. Oxygen rose, the air began to clear, and the sun, that star born from the same cloud, now reached the Earth's surface with more precision, more purpose. Light fed the oceans, oceans fed the air, and air fed the land. The cloud's materials were now rearranged into something breathtaking. Blue skies, green shores, winds that whispered over valleys of moss and stone. The same particles that once drifted cold in space now danced in sunlight, now fueled forests, now pulsed in veins. From these beginnings came complexity, life diversified. Some creatures learned to swim, others to walk, some began to breathe oxygen to build bones to form communities. The Earth wore a continent now, and those continents were in motion. Driven by the mantle beneath, they drifted, collided, split. Mountains rose, oceans closed, new land appeared, and through every shift the cloud's fingerprints remained. Iron from supernovae built blood. Calcium from cosmic dust built shells and teeth. Silica formed the eyes that would one day gaze up and wonder where it all began. Even now that question lingers. We live in cities built on ancient rock, breathe air once exhaled by volcanoes, drink water that passed through comets and clouds, and still we search. Still, we long to return to that original cloud, not to undo what has come, but to remember, to feel again the silence before structure, the freedom before form. The Earth is not the end of the cloud's journey. It is one chapter, and we who carry its atoms are the next. Beneath our feet, tectonic plates slide like quiet tectonic dreams. Above, the sky shifts with pressure and heat, carrying vapor to mountain and sea. In every direction, the Earth is telling the story of its origin, not with words, but with waves and wind and growth. The trees that rise from soil do not know they are born from stars, but in their leaves, in the photosynthesis that turns light into sugar, the memory is there. Sunlight strikes a leaf. Water splits. Electrons move. Energy flows. And that flow is ancient. It began in the cloud. It was shaped by gravity, ignited by fusion, scattered by explosion, gathered by dust, warmed by collapse. The tree is not alone. It's the next form of a star's desire. And so is everything else. The rain on your skin is the final sigh of an old vapor that once circled a young Earth. The salt in your blood is the taste of ancient oceans born from comet ice and volcanic breath. The breath you just took includes atoms once inhaled by ferns 100 million years ago, or perhaps once swirled in the heart of the very cloud that became this planet. You're not separate from the Earth, and Earth is not separate from the stars. When we peer into space, we see other clouds, nebulae glowing in purples and golds, sculpted by starlight drifting like thoughts across the dark. We know now that those clouds are nurseries too, that stars are still being born. that planets are still gathering their mass, still spinning into form, and somewhere in one of those clouds another Earth may be waiting, another ocean may be forming, another sky may be clearing, and on some distant shore something may be rising from the water to look back, to wonder. But for now, we are here, on this Earth, on this collection of dust and water that remembered how to become alive. We walk through forests made from starlight. We drink from rivers that carry the clouds' echoes. We speak in languages that began with chemistry, and we wonder. Always, we wonder. The cloud is gone, but it left instructions. It left its memory in the rocks, in the air, in us. And though the forms have changed, the flow remains. Earth is not just a planet. It is a process, a transformation, a vessel that turns silence into sound. So look around you. Everything you see began in that cloud. The atoms in your fingernails, the breath of the wind, the cry of the hawk. All of it was once part of something unshaped, something waiting, something ancient and invisible that chose at last to become a world. And in doing so it became you. Let us return now to the moment where the Earth has become a world of form and rhythm, a planet no longer ruled by the chaos of its birth, but by the gentle repetition of cycles, of rain and evaporation, of sunlight and shadow, of death and rebirth. The cloud that once drifted nameless in space has now become a planet of memory, holding within its soil the story of stars, holding within its waters the echo of comets, holding within its air the breath of volcanoes and trees alike. And yet, even as the Earth grew into a sanctuary for life, it never stopped changing. The story of its beginning did not end with its formation. It only grew more quiet, more intricate, like a melody that learns how to whisper instead of shout. The same atoms that once collapsed into fire now compose the wings of birds. The same minerals that once floated in dust now make up the eyes that reflect the sky. Everything is still the cloud. Everything is still the unfolding. The Earth continued its long transformation, its crust shifting slowly beneath our feet, reshaping continents, raising mountain ranges that would erode into sand, filling basins that would one day hold oceans and then deserts and then oceans again. The slow breath of plate tectonics, driven by heat left over from formation, by pressure from the mantle, by minerals formed in the heart of stars, continued to sculpt the face of the planet. With every rise and fall of land, the atmosphere responded. Rain fell on new stone. Rivers traced new paths. Wind carved new lines. And life, always responsive, always reaching, moved with the changes. Plants grew towards light. Creatures crawled from water to land. Wings unfolded into sky. Eyes opened to the brightness of day. From one ancient cloud came not only stone and air and ocean, but attention, awareness, choice. There is something tender in knowing that this planet, so full of contrast and motion, was born from something so simple, a rotating swirl of dust and gas. That something so soft and shapeless could become a place of storms and cliffs and glaciers. That something so quiet could give rise to a species that asks questions, that names things, that writes stories about the very dust it came from. We often look up at the stars and feel small, and yet the stars are within us. We are made not only of stardust, but of structure, of reaction, of memory. We are the dust rearranged. And Earth is the reminder that the universe is capable of becoming something more than its parts. Even now, every aspect of Earth's life reflects the transformation from cloud to planet. The seasons we experience are not accidents. They are echoes of the planet's orbit, of its tilted axis inherited from ancient collisions. The tides we watch rise and fall are pulled by the moon, itself a child of the Earth's violent youth. The weather that brings us rain is driven by sunlight, which itself is hydrogen fusing in the star that formed in the centre of the same nebula. It is all still connected. The cold that once filled that early cloud still exists, in the dark between galaxies, in the shadows of the moon. The heat that once ignited the sun still warms your skin. The spinning that began when gravity pulled gas into motion still turns the planet. The dance never ended, it only changed tempo. And in you, the story continues. The calcium in your teeth, the oxygen in your breath, the iron in your blood, all of it comes from beyond this world. You are composed of atoms that once drifted freely in a cloud that no longer exists. And yet here you are, moving, thinking, dreaming. You carry the cloud forward in your choices, in your voice, in your gaze. When you speak, you stir air made from volcanic gases and ancient comet vapor. When you swim, your body moves through molecules that once fell from a star. You're not separate from this story. You are the next chapter. We sometimes ask why Earth is so unique, why it holds life when so many other planets do not. Perhaps the answer lies not only in chemistry or distance from the sun, but in timing, in patience. The solar nebula was not special in its contents, but in the calmness of its collapse, the gentleness of its spin, the long quiet that allowed complexity to grow. Earth had time to cool, time to collect water, time to allow life to begin. The molecule by molecule, mistake by mistake, time to become home. And now, with all our tools, all our machines, we look back at the stars, trying to see where it all began. Telescopes peer into the dark, into the clouds that still form in distant galaxies. And what do we see? Light from stars being born, dust collecting, hydrogen swirling. We are watching in slow motion the birth of other systems, other planets, and perhaps one day other beings. The story of Earth is not singular. It is part of a pattern, a possibility, a path that matter takes when it is given enough time and enough silence. But Earth is still here, still changing. Climate shifts, ice melts, forests fall and rise again, species evolve, mountains crumble, oceans move. The cloud's legacy is not one of stability, but of evolution. The planet you stand on today is not the same one that held the feet of the first humans. The sky you look at has changed. The stars have shifted. The magnetic field has danced. The air has grown and thinned and warmed and cooled. Everything is still moving. Everything is still forming. We are inside the clouds unfolding even now. So what do we do knowing this? Perhaps we remember. We remember that the world is not fixed, that it was born from chance and heat and gravity, from elements that only wanted to bond, to spin, to join. Perhaps we remember that our lives are part of that same motion, that our thoughts are made of the same particles that once floated without name or direction, that the water in our eyes, the strength in our bones, the quiet behind our dreams, none of it is separate. All of it is shared. All of it is still the cloud. And when we walk through forests or touch the sea or feel the wind rise through a canyon, we can feel it again, that first memory. The world is made of it. We are made of it. Every stone and seed and breath is a page in the cloud's journal. The earth is not a place we live on. It is something we are always becoming, and we, like the planet, are never finished. One day, Earth too will change beyond what we know. The sun will grow hotter, the oceans may rise and vanish, the crust may crack, the air may thin, but nothing will be lost. Every atom will find its next shape. Every memory will be folded into a new form. Perhaps the earth will become dust again. Perhaps it will rejoin the cloud, and perhaps, far from here, the story will begin again. A new swirl, a new star, a new home. But for now we are here, standing in the middle of that ancient unfolding, breathing in what was once scattered, becoming quietly the next part of a journey that began in silence, in darkness, in dust. The cloud became a planet. The planet became life, and life became aware. And now, in this moment, you are part of it all, the cloud, the fire, the sea, the story. In the beginning, it was not the fire that made Earth ready for life. It was the ice, not the warmth of the sun or the heat of volcanoes, but the cold, the still, the drifting silence of frozen water that fell, piece by piece, from the outer reaches of the solar system. Ice is often overlooked, mistaken for lifelessness, for pause, for delay. But it is not dead, it is only patient. And long before the oceans covered the earth, before clouds wept and rivers ran, the first water arrived in a frozen hush, carried inside ancient bodies that formed far from the sun, comets, asteroids, an icy planetoid shaped by cold and silence. They wandered for billions of years, untouched, unseen, their bellies full of water frozen so long ago that it had never once known motion, and when they finally struck the young earth, they shattered, and from their destruction poured the softest beginnings of the seas. Imagine a world before water, a rocky ball, battered and burning, still forming its skin. There was no blue, no green, no rain to soothe the heat. But in the darkness beyond the planets, in the Kuiper belt and the Oort cloud, ice had been quietly collecting, crystallizing around dust grains, forming dirty snowballs the size of mountains. These were the leftovers of creation, the parts that didn't coalesce into planets, that didn't burn or collapse, that instead drifted at the edges, waiting. These icy travellers held not only frozen water, but also carbon, ammonia, methanol, and simple organic molecules, raw material for life locked away like forgotten seeds. And over time, as gravity played its endless music, some were nudged inward, some were flung toward the heat, and Earth, still young and violent, welcomed them with open wounds. The impacts were cataclysmic. Comets do not knock politely, they arrive with force, with velocity, with fire. But in their violent descent, they released their treasure. Ice melted, steam rose, rain began, and slowly, over millions of years, the earth cooled. The steam condensed, the skies darkened with clouds, and at last it began to fall, not fire, not ash, but water. Not in torrents at first, but in mist, in gentle veils that kissed the ground and ran into the low places. And the water stayed. It collected. It filled the scars of impact and the valleys between forming mountains. And from this came the oceans, and from the oceans came life. The idea that water arrived from space may seem far away, like something from myth, but science finds it written in the fingerprints of isotopes. We can measure the hydrogen in Earth's oceans, compare it to the water found in comets, and in some cases, we find a match. Not perfect, not universal, but close enough to suggest that at least some of the water we drink once drifted for billions of years in the cold outer dark. It is humbling to know that a droplet on your fingertip may have travelled farther than the Earth has spun, that it once rested in silence, untouched, unthawed, until a moment of impact transformed it into rain, that the water you boil for tea once fell as part of a comet, burning through the atmosphere, only to cool, condense, and settle in a pond where life would one day stir. And yet this ice did more than hydrate the Earth. It seeded it. Locked inside many of these frozen bodies were the precursors to organic molecules, amino acids, sugars, carbon chains, simple things, but vital. When released upon impact or through slow warming, these ingredients entered the young Earth's soup. In the shallow seas and tidal pools they began to interact. Sunlight struck them, lightning danced across them, and over time they became something more. Proteins, membranes, replicators, the first hints of life made possible by the ice that remembered the stars. Ice has always carried memory. In glaciers, it holds the story of ancient skies, air bubbles trapped in its crystalline lattice, silent witnesses to climates long past. In comets, it holds the unedited version of the solar system's beginning. It is the least altered material we can touch, unchanged for eons, preserving the earliest chemical conditions from which everything else emerged. And so, when we study the ice from beyond, we are reading the prologue to Earth. We are hearing the voice of the cosmos before it cleared its throat and spoke planets into being. Even now, the Earth carries reminders of that frozen origin. In the polar ice caps, in the permafrost, in the deep caves where water hangs as icicles too ancient to melt. And beyond Earth, the story continues. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn, Europa, Enceladus, Titan, are wrapped in ice, yet beneath it there may be oceans. And in those oceans, perhaps warmth from within, perhaps chemistry, perhaps motion, perhaps life. The lesson of Earth is that where ice melts and water flows, the potential for life stirs. It does not need to begin in fire, it can begin in stillness, in cold, in the patient waiting of ice. Comets still fall, though less often now, but when they do, they remind us that we are not separate from the stars, that Earth is not an island, but a participant in the cosmic exchange. Material flows between planets and space, between asteroids and atmospheres, and with every icy impact there is the possibility of change, of renewal, of memory returned. Even our myths remember. In cultures around the world, ice is linked to origin. The Norse spoke of a realm of frost from which the first beings emerged. In some Native American stories, the earth was once frozen and life came from the thaw. In others, stars fell and brought rain, fire, water. These are not mere metaphors, they are echoes. Echoes of a time when humans could still feel that their world was made of something older, something that fell gently and coldly from the sky. And perhaps ice is not merely the absence of heat, but the keeper of potential. It preserves, it holds, it shelters, it waits. Life too requires stillness as much as motion, rest as much as hunger, winter as much as spring. And so, in the long, slow fall of ice from space, Earth found its moment of balance. Fire softened, air thickened, water settled, and the stage was set not only for motion but for memory. So when you look at ice, do not see it as lifeless. See it as paused, as waiting, as listening. It is the voice of the universe whispered across eons, cooled by distance, softened by silence. It is a letter from the beginning, sealed in frost. And when it melts, whether in your palm or in the deep sea vents of an alien moon, it speaks. It tells of stars. It tells of orbits and distance and time. It tells of life not as an accident, but as a continuation, as a quiet reply to the long question of existence. And you are part of that replay, the water in your cells, in your tears, in your breath. It remembers, it knows silence, it knows falling, it knows impact, and it knows how to stay, to linger, to return. You are made not just of water, but of water that fell from the stars, water that burned, water that cooled, water that chose again and again to become. Drift now with the idea that ice is not the opposite of life, but its quiet twin. Not a void, but a vessel. Not an end, but a beginning paused in crystal. Ice has always waited, not with impatience, but with precision, holding time still, holding molecules in place, preserving stories too delicate to survive in heat or wind. When we think of ice, we often think of endings, frozen lakes, cold silence, winter's hush. But in truth, ice is a kind of archive, a slow-moving current of memory that moves through space, through time, through the body of Earth itself. The earliest ice that touched this planet arrived not in peace, but in flame. Comets streaking through the sky, their frozen hearts melting into steam as they fell. But what they left behind was not just water, it was structure. It was the scaffolding of oceans, the molecules of beginnings, the building blocks of all breath and thought. Long after the great bombardment faded and Earth's crust cooled, ice remained a sculptor. Glaciers carved valleys into mountains, not in decades but in millennia, their slow advance and retreat shaping the surface of continents. The great ice ages came and went, covering the northern hemisphere in a frozen silence that lasted for tens of thousands of years. Beneath those frozen sheets, rivers shifted, forests disappeared, species adapted or perished. But even as life was pushed southward into warmth and refuge, it never disappeared. It huddled close, it survived. And when the ice withdrew, it returned, more diverse, more resilient, more complex. Ice was not just a destroyer, it was a purifier, a test, a pause between verses of Earth's evolving song. And in the ice itself, secrets remained. Scientists now drill deep into glaciers, extracting cores that read like diaries of ancient air. Tiny bubbles trapped inside preserve the atmosphere of ages long past. Carbon levels, methane signatures, temperature swings. In this frozen record, we find echoes of volcanoes, of droughts, of human industrial footprints. We find patterns, we find warnings. The ice has seen what we forget. It does not lie, it remembers. It tells us that Earth breathes, not just in the lungs of creatures, but in seasons, in glaciers, in cycles of freeze and melt that span beyond the limits of human memory. But Earth is not the only keeper of frozen memory. In the solar system beyond, ice rules. Europa, a moon of Jupiter, is coated in ice. beneath that ice lies a vast ocean, warmed by the moon's own tidal flexing, kept liquid by the slow kneading of gravity. Scientists believe that hydrothermal vents may lie at the bottom of that ocean, much like those that birthed life on our own planet. And if they exist, they may harbour more than heat. They may harbour chemistry, they may harbour cells, they may harbour stories still unwritten. Enceladus, a smaller moon of Saturn, shoots jets of icy water into space, plumes that our instruments have tasted, revealing salt, organic molecules, the signs of oceans hidden beneath. Even distant Pluto, once thought a frozen relic, shows signs of internal activity, of ice moving, reshaping, possibly flowing beneath its surface. Ice does not mean absence, it means potential. On every world where ice is found, there is the chance that it is hiding water, shielding it, preserving it for a time when it may stir. And where water flows even beneath a mile of pressure, even in the dark, life may whisper. The ice that falls from stars, that forms at the edge of planets, that waits in shadows, is not inert. It is watching. It is holding space for something more. And perhaps in the silence of frozen moons and drifting comets, the conditions are gathering. The right molecules, the right heat, the right motion. And perhaps, as on Earth, the ice will melt. And when it does, it may become an ocean. And in that ocean, the story may begin again. Back on Earth, ice continues its work. It reflects sunlight, moderating the planet's temperature. It holds vast reserves of fresh water in glaciers and snowpacks. It moves in slow rivers, glaciers creaking and shifting, carving fjords and revealing rock that has not seen light in 10,000 years. It breaks from cliffs into the sea, birthing icebergs that drift like ghost ships, each one a fragment of a frozen land slowly released into the ocean. And when it melts, it changes things. Not only the sea level, but the balance of salt and temperature that drives ocean currents, that guides weather, that dictates the paths of storms and the breath of seasons. And yet that ice is melting faster now. Not because of cosmic fire, but because of human flame. The gases we have sent into the sky are warming the atmosphere, and the glaciers are retreating. The poles are thinning, the permafrost is softening, and the balance once held in place for millennia is shifting. As it melts, the ice releases more than water. It releases methane, trapped for eons. It releases bacteria, frozen long before cities ever stood. It reveals bones, forests, secrets, and still it remembers. It does not rage, it simply melts. And in its melting, it offers us one last warning, one last lesson. That to forget the ice is to forget the story that made us. That to ignore the silence is to lose the song. But there is still time to listen, time to remember that ice is not just a thing to be conquered, but a teacher. That cold is not the enemy of life, but its protector. That stillness is not the absence of change, but its quiet preparation. Even now, snow falls in the mountains. Even now, hail hammers fields. Even now, on distant comets, ice waits. The stars continue to shine. The solar system continues to spin. And somewhere at the edge of the known, another icy traveller begins its long fall inward. It does not hurry. It does not ask to be seen. It simply follows its path. And perhaps thousands of years from now, it will find a planet. Perhaps it will melt. Perhaps it will offer water. Perhaps again it will begin. And here on this world, ice will remain a part of the pattern. We will skate upon it. We will drink from it. We will hide in it. We will study it. It will hold our history even as it becomes part of our future. We are not separate from the ice, we are made of it. Our ancestors survived because of it, crossed glaciers, followed ice ages, carved tools from frozen land. Our bones remember it, our cells require it, our art reflects it. The softness of snow, the sharpness of frost, the beauty of light on crystal, these are not accidents. They are echoes of the Great Fall, the ancient freeze, the quiet arrival of something more enduring than fire. So next time you see ice forming on a window or watch snow falling under streetlight, remember you are witnessing a continuation, a message, a miracle too slow for speech. That drop once hung in a comet's core. That crystal once drifted through void. That frost is the echo of stars, and the story it carries is still unfolding. Let us linger here at the end of the journey, not to close it, but to witness how gently it continues, how the ice that once fell from the stars has never truly stopped falling, never ceased transforming, never forgotten its purpose. The earth spins on, warmed by a sun born of the same cloud that shaped the icy wanderers. Our rivers run, our lungs breathe, our thoughts flicker, but beneath all of it, beneath the noise and speed of civilization, the slow memory of ice remains. It is carved into the mountains, it is buried deep in polar silence, it is coded into the cycles of migration, into the genes of trees that sleep each winter, into the dreams of mammals that learn to hibernate because the world once froze. Ice shaped us, and it still does. We often speak of time as something linear, something always moving forward. But ice knows better. Ice holds time. It locks it in layers, presses it down gently, until history becomes structure. A glacier is not just frozen water. It is a living archive, a moving monument to patience. And within it, air from 1,000 years ago still whispers. Snow that once fell while mammoths walked still rests, compressed but intact. Ice has seen every sunrise the earth has ever known. It has outlasted empires, witnessed extinction and rebirth. It does not speak, but if it melts in your hand, it tells you everything. The final gift of ice is not water, but reflection. It teaches us to slow down, to endure, to listen. It is not in a hurry. It allows transformation to occur not with explosion, but with the softness of melting. Every spring it disappears not in grief, but in grace, and yet it always returns. In the high mountains, in the polar dark, in the breath of clouds that freeze mid-fall. This cycle, freeze and thaw, hold and release, is not simply a weather pattern. It is the rhythm of existence itself. It mirrors the way we learn, the way we grieve, the way we grow. There are times for movement and times for stillness. There are moments to burn bright and moments to cool, to reflect, to become clear. And in our clearest moments, we can feel the truth that we live on a planet sculpted by silence. The oceans we now sail began with falling ice. The rain that feeds our crops is the softened whisper of cometary fire. The snow that calms the city at night carries atoms once part of interstellar clouds. We look around and see forests, rivers, animals, architecture. But all of it, every brick, every reef, root, every is water shaped by time, and the water, in turn, was shaped by ice. The stillness of ice gave way to the flow of rivers. The crash of glaciers carved lakes where fish now leap. The weight of ancient sheets pressed valleys into being, made homes for trees, for wolves, for us. Even now our dependence on frozen water continues. Crops rely on snowmelt. Reservoirs swell in spring because mountains held their breath all winter. Ice cools our bodies, preserves our medicines, carries our past. And yet we are melting it too fast. Glaciers retreat in every hemisphere. Ice shelves collapse. Ancient patterns unravel. What once took centuries to shift now disappears in a single generation. And with each melting edge, we lose not only water, we lose the memory it carries. The lines written in deep ice, the layers that kept time, the quiet equilibrium that kept our climate breathing steadily, all of it unravels. And yet ice, even in retreat, does not accuse. It simply leaves. And in doing so, it asks a final question. Will we remember? For all our technology, we are still creatures of the cycles. Our ancestors followed the ice. They crossed frozen rivers. They shaped tools from its silence. And when they finally settled, it was the melting that made the land fertile, that made the rivers bountiful, that made stories possible. Every culture on Earth has a word for snow, for cold, for frost. Every language has learned how to speak of ice because ice has always been part of the story. And even in lands where it rarely falls, its absence shapes the seasons, its memory lingers in bones, in crops, and the timing of migrations. We do not live apart from it. We live because of it. Even in our myths, ice holds a sacred space. It is the realm of gods and spirits, of high mountains and deep memory. It is the mirror in which heroes see themselves. It is the threshold that must be crossed to grow. Ice is not a void. It is a passage. And we who walk across frozen fields or skate across frozen lakes are not escaping time. We are stepping into it. We are walking into the past, into the stars, into the cloud where it all began. Because before there were continents, there were comets. Before there were forests, there was frost. Before we spoke, the sky snowed. And that snow has never stopped falling. It just changed form. It became rivers, it became clouds, it became the mist on your window and the tears in your eyes. And even now, light from distant stars still strikes icy comets, still dances across frozen moons, still carries with it the recipe of water. Hydrogen, oxygen, silence, time, and what of the future? Will ice still fall? Will it still shape? Will it still remember? The answer is yes, if we listen. If we protect what remains. If we learn again to respect the stillness, to value the slow, to honour the archives that melt in silence. The next chapter is not yet written, but it will be. And ice, if we let it, will write its part. In mountain snows that replenish streams, in polar seas that reflect sunlight, in clouds that drift across a sky still blue. Perhaps one day we will return to the stars. Perhaps we will walk on the frozen oceans of Europa, sail beneath the ice of Enceladus, taste the snow of Mars. And when we do, we will not be strangers. We will be coming home to a memory our cells still carry. We will recognize the texture, the cold, the glint of light through frozen breath. Because once, long ago, ice fell to earth. And in doing so, it gave us more than water. It gave us the chance to begin. So let us end here, not in conclusion, but in stillness. Let us pause as the ice does. Let us hold this moment the way frost holds a leaf, the way glaciers hold the mountain's shadow. Let us remember that we come from cold, from stars, from water that knew how to wait, and let us carry that knowing softly, like snow underfoot. Because though we may melt, though we may change, though we may one day return to the dust from which we came, the story does not end. It flows, it drifts, it falls, like ice, like light, like the quiet miracle that first fell from the stars and chose at last to become a world, to become a